Shri Krishna in Maha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentary of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 5. Family is the field of trial and test, wherein the individuals can grow into healthier personalities, but it is not in itself the final destination. Live life with detachment at home. It is but life's college. Mistake it not as life's main field of achievement. If all philosophical declarations cannot be practically lived, philosophy itself becomes a utopian idealism preached by a poetic visionary and therefore must fail to influence life or culture. To live in attachment and to sink into the family mire seems to be natural for man and woman. Mind takes to it as readily as the duck to water. Therefore, the philosophy must prescribe a technique by which one can grow into the required state of detachment. That technique is described here. Intelligent inquiry is the only antidote for the follies of delusion. The method of inquiry to be adopted is being indicated here. Acharya Shankara asks us to inquire, who is your wife? Who is your son? On analysis, we shall find that the beloved wife was a simple daughter of her father until in marriage you were tied to her. Life being so uncertain, nobody can foresee who is to part first, and in case it is your lot to precede her in death, there again she will be living as a widow. Thus, in life, man and woman are born independently, and each one must die and depart alone. In the pilgrimage from birth to death, in the travel from life to death, at a certain junction, each met with the other and thereafter travelled together, no doubt, serving each other as all good-hearted travellers always do. The companionship parts when the destination is reached. By this analysis, one shall realize the right attitude one should have in maintaining a healthy relationship with the world. So too is the son. When you analyze your real relationship, you shall see that the son has become yours only after his birth. Before that, it was a fetus. Before that, it was only a seed in your loins. And that itself came from the food you assimilated. The food came from the earth. Thus, a clod of birth in its various manifestations became the fruit, the food, the seed, the fetus, and the child, and therefore the child itself is nothing but an effect of the ultimate cause, the mud. If you analyze yourself as the father, you too are nothing but the product of a clod of mud of another period of time and place. One piece of mud then gets attached to another piece of mud. How strange, how powerful is delusion, Maya. The empirical life, the samsara, is a fascination only to the thoughtless. Intelligently meditate upon them. Inquire, to whom do I belong? To what factor divine does my very existence owe its continuance? From where have we all come to play this passing show in the field of this world? Where are we going? When once departed from here, what is our destination? If there be thus a source from which we have come and a destination to which we are going, what exactly should then be our duty now and here? What should be our attitude to things and beings and the infinite happenings that crowd around us and march through our existence here? O brother, please contemplate. Shankara is assuming now not the status of a teacher advising the taught, but he talks as an elder brother would to an erring younger brother. However, it is to be noted that there are several other readings. Instead of brother, there is a reading which means mad one. This is also quite appropriate in the context of this stanza, because a madman is one who is not acting as he should. The deluded fool, in his extreme attachment to things of the world outside when he lives, expressing an incapacity to think rightly and act properly, is also a mad one in life. Verse 9, Sassangatve Nissangatvam, Nissangatve Nirmohatvam, Nirmohatve Nischalatatvam, Nischalatatve Jivan Muktihi. Through the company of the good, there arises non-attachment. Through non-attachment, there arises freedom from delusion. When there is freedom from delusion, there is the immutable reality. On experiencing immutable reality, there comes the state of liberated in life. From all that has been said so far, it is very clear that to live in the world, earning and saving, is not in itself a real profit. To live in attachment is certainly an ill-rewarding program of existence. To waste our life in lust and passions of our flesh is dissipating ourselves in all our faculties. Through Pratipaksha Bhavana, we must try to withdraw from them all and spend the energy so conserved in seeking and serving Govinda. It is easy to appreciate the logic of this philosophy, but not always so easy to appreciate its canons, and indeed it is almost impossible all of a sudden to live its recommended way of life. This difficulty is experienced by all students of philosophy everywhere, at all the times. All true philosophers must appreciate this logical difficulty in the student and provide for him various practical methods by which the poor seeker, in his frail spiritual strength at this moment, may be helped to walk the path, or else philosophy itself would become an impracticable utopia. Acharya Shankara talks directly to his devotees at all times. His is not the style of the Rishi declarations, wherein the inspired seer, closing his eyes, roared and thundered in planting words of his infinite joy of the impossible which he had rendered possible. These frightening commandments, gushing down from the soft flowing hearts of the peaceful masters, constitute the Upanishads. Shankara, the commentator, serving as a missionary in the country with a definite goal of cultural revival to be achieved, never seems to forget the quality and caliber of his listeners' intellect. In the stanza under review, Shankara gives a simple ladder of progress, by carefully climbing which a seeker can comfortably arrive at the highest reaches of perfection. In spite of our appreciation of the rationale in the philosophy so far discussed, the fact still that we are living every hour of our existence amidst temptations of life, where wealth and woman are the main enchantment. Artificially, I can build up an intellectual barrier against my passions and lusts, and thus I may restrain them from their onward flow for some time. But the objects of fascination are so numerous and their enchantments so powerful that the mighty sorcery of the sensuous world is too irresistible for an individual seeker to fight against. In order to reinforce the efforts of a student in his early days of seeking and to give him more courage and strength, Shankara advises him to have plenty of company of the good, satsanga. As a result of the practice of Pratipaksha Bhavana, the student is no doubt holding the company of good thoughts within himself. This is to protect him from the rising waves of passions within. But in order to fight against the hordes of temptations in the everyday world, he needs a fortress around him, which is drawn from his association with the good people. The company that we keep is very important. The worldly seekers are carelessly choosing their friends and are indiscriminate in choosing their associations. The chances are that he, in spite of his knowledge, and determination will be snatched away in bad company by the powerful waves of the blind passions. To be in the company of the good is to be with those who are devotees of the Lord and are themselves seekers of the highest. In such an assembly, there is a power created which in the congregation erects a powerful fortress against the magic of the world outside. As a result of the influence of the good company, the human mind develops steadily a capacity to withdraw from the sensuous fields of attraction and thus discovers itself the secret of detachment. When the sense of attachment is sponged away from the inner bosom, delusion, MOHA, and all the delusory false values that we give to the world can no more remain. It is always the mind that puts a value upon the objects, and thereafter the inert objects of the world become capable of enchanting that mind. When once the mind has started seeing the things as they are, because the mind has redeemed itself from its own vasana encrustations, the immutable reality is glimpsed by the mind. When this experience becomes more and more established in one, that individual becomes a God-realized saint, liberated in life, Jivan Mukta. The stanza reminds us of the ladder of fall that Gita describes. Glancing over the contents of these two stanzas, it is evidently clear that Gita is showing the ladder of the downward fall, while Shankara is showing the ladder of the upward climb. There is yet another reading of the stanza where, instead of immutable reality, Nischala Tattvam, we have steadfastness, Nischala Tattvam. When the delusion of the mind is wiped away, the mind gains a steadfastness in meditation, and with this steadfastness in meditation, the experience of the highest and the consequent state of liberation in life, Jivan Mukti, is easily attained. Verse 10, Vayasi gate kaha kama vikaraha, shushke nire kaha kasaraha, chine vitte kaha parivaro, jnate tattve kaha samsaraha. When the age, youthfulness has passed, where is lust and its play? When water has evaporated, where is the lake? When wealth is reduced, where is the retinue? When the truth is realized, where is the samsara? In our epigrammatic statements, Shankara drives home to the student's understanding that where the cause has ended, the effects cannot continue. When age and its youthfulness have passed away, where is lust and its play? The maddening lust of blindering passion can remain with one only so long as the skin is tight, the muscles are hard, the blood is stormy, and the individual is young and hearty. Lust springs only from youthfulness. When the cause is removed, the effects cannot remain all by themselves. When the waters are dried up, the lake can no longer continue to exist. The dried up lake or tank can only express as the bed. Only when waters are there can they express themselves as lake or tank and serve the world as such. So long as the waters of desire are playing in the mind, the passionate youth vigorously strives to fulfill them. But when once these desires have dried up, how can the man of action strive to acquire and court? When the wealth is reduced, where are the relations, dependents, supporters, in short, one's entire retinue? They follow behind an individual only so long as he can look after them and they can profit by him. When the capacity in the individual has ended, the retinue also disappears, and wealth is an uncertain possession. Nobody can say when and how the course on an individual or when she will without regret shamelessly push him into penury and starvation and depart in another direction towards another individual. With these three examples, it is clear that when the cause is absent, the effect is also absent. Carrying this analogy into the subjective realms of spiritual perfection, Shankara asks the question, when the truth is realized, where is samsara? The ignorance of the post gives us the delusory vision of the ghost and the consequent fears. At the non-apprehension of reality, misapprehensions start, and they provide the horse of sorrows for the deluded. Due to vasana fumes called ignorance, avidya, the perfection is not experienced, and therefore man, revolting against his own sense of imperfections, desires, plans, works, and strives to acquire and possess the outer world, whereby he hopes that he can see fuller fulfillment in life. Here we will end part 5. We will continue the remaining in the part 6 by praying God for all the best to all the spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shri Krishna Namaha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Sri Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 6. Through the process explained in the previous stanza, when the vasanas have been eliminated, meaning when the ignorance of the reality is ended, all the misconceptions also must end. The delusory sense of individuality arising from the myth of the mind and its dream objects constitutes the painful sufferer amidst the finite objects. When once the vasanas have ended, the cause has been eliminated, and naturally, therefore, the effects cannot exist by themselves. When the truth is realized, where is the ephemeral phenomenon of finite objects and their unlimited tyrannies? Herein, then, is the cause for our conditionings in our inner life, which in its turn created the chaos of an ego and its meaningless achievements and the mad roamings of the individuality. When this inner vasana condition has been changed, the ego has been eliminated, and where there is no ego, the world perceived, felt, and thought of must necessarily recede into nothingness. As the phenomenal play of enchantments gets obliterated, the experience of the infinite consciousness comes to reveal as the state of truth, and at this experience the individuality ends and the universal consciousness becomes the very nature of the meditator. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman, and for this there is no other path than that which was discussed in the previous stanza. Verse 11. माकुरु धनजन यौवन गर्वं हरति निमेषात् कालः सर्वं मायामयमिदमखिलं बुद्ध्वा ब्रह्मपदत्वं प्रविश विदित्वा. Take no pride in your possession, in the people at your command, in the youthfulness that you have. Time loots away all this in a moment. Leaving aside all this, after knowing their illusory nature, realize the state of Brahman and enter into it. False vanities and hollow conceits tie man to the wheel of woe in life, samsara. The empirical process of change and the consequent jerks affects man only when he keeps the relationship of himself with the world of objects, feelings, and thoughts through his body, mind, and intellect. By his, he creates a false attitude to things and beings around him as my people, my things, my joys, my ideas, etc. These false vanities throw man out of himself to suffer the storms of finitude and the floods of the change. All these are really the unavoidable contents of the objective world. Wealth, social connections, and family status, youth and its vigor, these form the tottering pillars upon which is built the platform of sense enjoyment. This drama of passion and lust can end only in utter dissipation and personality exhaustion. These have been already discussed and clearly shown in the earlier verses. Wealth is never constant, nor can she ever remain faithful. She must move from hand to hand, visiting all. Youth can never last for long. Relationships in this world, the social status, popularity, and power, all these are indicated by the term people, jana. All of them entirely depend upon the fancy of moment, the mood of the hour. This world of illusory appearances is a field of preoccupation only to the delusory ego, which springs from one's own identification with the perceiver, feeler, thinker in oneself. Seek the knower of it all, the principle that illuminates all experiences, Sakshi Chaitanya, in the very core of one's own bosom. Realize that this consciousness, I am Atma, presiding over all our inner experiences, is the consciousness infinite everywhere, Brahman. Verse 12. Dinayaminau sayam pratah shishira vasantau punarayatah kalaha kridat gacchatyayuhu tadapina munchattyasha vayuhu. Day and night, dawn and dusk, winter and spring, again and again come and depart. The time sports the life ebbs away, and yet one leaves not the gusts of desires. The day decays to end itself in the night. The night dies only to bosom forth into the following day. The dawn grows in vigor and heat to the noon, but soon wanes away to be the mellow dusk. On the wheel of happenings, the months steadily glide along, and in its soft-footed silent march, the irresistible floods of the time roll up in the waves of years, sweeping everything in front of its relentless might. Hushed in the silence of its own wonderment, age slips unperceived into its slushy grave. Time moves on. That which was future becomes the present and itself rolls away to join the endless ocean of the past. Time never stops on no condition, for no person. It is ever on the march. Man, gathering memories from his own past, barricades his present, sets them ablaze with his excitements in his day-to-day life, and the rising fumes of his bosom blur his vision to make his life rigid with his anxieties for the future. As we thus waste ourselves with our endless maneuvers in the irresistible stride of time, all our hopes and plans get defeated and rooted. The young, courageous heart of the spiritual child Nachiketa realizes this ridiculous drama when he consoles his old father Vajastravas by reminding him that the things born must die and perish away only to be born again. Nothing is permanent. Later, the same spiritual hero, talking face to face with his teacher, Lord Death, at the death's own portico, with utter disdain rejected the gifts that Yama offered him. And there again we hear the same truth expressed in the vigorous words of the child. Even the longest life that you can give is but a trifle. May you keep to yourselves the dance and the music. Life is at times mercy. In not recognizing this, man desires to enjoy the sense objects, strives, sweats, and toils endlessly to acquire, to possess, and to aggrandize, to hope, to spend, and death snatches away everything from him. He is compelled to leave everything here, and with painful bundles of vasanas acquired in his desire-ridden, selfish life, the miserable creature departs. How sad, indeed, how tragic! The objects glitter with an illusory beauty and sing their dissipation songs only because they are rendered so enchanting by our own mind, just as the objects of flaming joys in our dreams. This dazzling glow of joy in them conceals the highest reality. A golden disk covers the brilliant face of the truth, declares Ishavasya Upanishad, and therefore the Upanishad student therein could not realize what the teacher declared. Everything that is here present is closed by Isha. Sensuous passions alone make man blind to his own true state of perfection. Desire for the fleeting, delusory golden deer is for the time being seemingly more powerful for Sita than her infinite love for Rama, her divine beloved. This is delusion at play, Maya with a vengeance. Life steadily ebbs away, but desire fed by the sense gratifications only grows the more by them. Body decays and becomes infirm. It has grown to have no more strength to enjoy, but the man hungers all the more for sense enjoyments. Death crawls behind, disease and decay accompany him, piloted by worries and anxieties. This mournful procession reaches the edge of the grave. Still, man wants the joys of the pain ridden objects. Be wise, give up desires. Seek the all-satisfying reality that lies behind the mental show of change and sorrow. The infinite alone will satisfy you. Seek it with a mind withdrawn from the fever of all passions. Verse 13. Kate kanta danagata chinta vatula kim tava nasti niyanta trijagati sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavarnava tarane nauka. O distracted one, why worry about wife, wealth, etc.? Is there not for you the one who ordains, rules, commands? In the three worlds, it is the association with good people alone that can serve as a boat to cross the sea of change, birth and death. Why worry about wife or wealth? There is yet another reading. Why dissipate mentally over the lips of your lady? To worry over anything will not pay in life. To worry means to waste our mental energies, and when once the mind is stormed with sensuous thoughts regarding any problem, the impoverished mind has no more any vitality left over in it, with which it may face effectively its challenge. Worry exhausts, it saps out all the fluid dynamism that the personality has, with which alone it can confidently face the battle of life. Man fails not because the world is strong enough to break him down, but it is always only because man becomes weaker, and thus relatively the world of happenings is rendered more powerful. Remember, the weak must perish in the law of nature. To dissipate oneself in sensuous thoughts, as indicated in the Sanja, is indeed unholy, and to do so upon one's own partner in life is indeed a self-insulting criminal meanness. Wife is something more than a mere sensuous convenience. To consider her as only a chattel for your pleasure and sense gratification is to pull down the institution of home and sanctity of the motherhood in her. Such degrading, demeaning, devolutionary thought currents, when they arise in the bosom of the seeker, should be curtailed, and a man must uplift his thoughts by conscious remembrance of the Lord. The entire stanza is addressed to the sensuous man, and the Acharya here calls him the best among fools who constantly waste themselves in lascivious thoughts. But having fallen into this wrong rut of thinking, and having cultivated the habit of emptying one's personality, vitality through such mental link, that is now the remedy for coming out of this self-ruining habit. Constant and continuous association with good people who are themselves well-educated, self-controlled, men with vision and a mission is the only known remedy. In the beginning, by such a continuous association, the mind will slowly take up new channels of thinking and ultimately will come to forget the old habits of thought. This alone can be the only remedy. This contact will develop in us a healthy attitude towards things, which in their turn will give a new purpose and direction of our thought life. When the quality and the texture of our thoughts have changed for the better, the seeker shall discover in himself a new inspiration welling within, pushing him into greater efforts in more rewarding fields. This new lease of life in the fresh atmosphere of healthy thoughts will encourage him day by day to strive for the higher and will give him a clear picture of the goal of life. He develops a pair of mental antennae extremely sensitive to feel his path, the means of achieving his own goal. A radar effect. Physical self-control, Dhamma, brings about mental peace, Shama, which creates a satisfying inner joy, Santosha, of the spiritual heart. With such an inner instrument alone can sincere self-study, Swadhyaya, and reflection, Vichara, be undertaken with the assurance of creditable profit. In fact, therefore, the earliest preparation to enter into this walk of life is a contact with the good, Sajjana Sangati. This association with the good is not only helpful in the elementary stages of spiritual seeking, but also beneficial at the seeker's subsequent stages of self-development and growing within. Good association, Satsanga, with the spiritual teachers and co-students will help us throughout our pilgrimage. Therefore, Sajjana Sangati is metaphorically used here as the boat, Nauka, to cross the ocean of limitation. Bhavarnama, a boat is not only useful just while leaving one shore, but until we land safely at our destination. All throughout the journey, the boat is the which keeps us afloat on the sea. As each have lashes on it, the boat absorbs the direct shocks and imparts to the traveler only a little tossing, perhaps. Here we will end part 6. We will continue the remaining in part 7 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Aspirants, Shri Krishna Namaha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Sri Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 7. Atop the crest of wave, on the ascending slope of waves, at all places, all through the passage, the boat keeps us dry, safe, and relatively comfortable. Constant association with the wise becomes thus a protective armor on the inner equipment, which are the only armaments with which a seeker has to contend alone with the dire enemies of his own false values and acquired habits of sensuous living. Verse 14. Jatilo mundi lunchita keshaha kashayambara bahukrita veshaha pashyannapicha pashyati muko hyudara nimittam bahukrita veshaha. One ascetic with matted locks, one with shaven head, one with hairs pulled out one by one, another parading in his ochre robes. These are fools who, though seeing, do not see. Indeed, these different disguises or apparels are only for their belly's sake. We are told that Cain, the second son of the only father at that time, Adam, started murder and destruction of life on the surface of the created world. When the world was first created, according to the Christian mythology, the art of killing was inaugurated by Cain because he never wanted to work. With the minimum work, he wanted food, so he found that with least effort, he could have plenty to fill his belly. If he stood behind the rocks and treacherously killed any animal and ate it. Minimum labor and maximum comfort is the dangerous philosophy of selfishness that started the destruction of civilization. Wherever there is this philosophy, man must sink into immoral, unethical, uncultured, barbarous ways. As children and grandchildren of this great first father, this human instinct to be idle has remained true to the type, and is seen even now in our own times at all levels of society and in all departments of activity. Idlers and shams are plenty in all periods of history. Shankara's era also was no exception to it, and even Mahatmas and Sannyasis were not totally above this law. There must have been in the Acharya's own times, if not as many as they are available now, at least a few who must have wandered into sannyasa as escapists from life, seeking the finding a happier life in bluffing the generation and playing upon the credulity of the people. Such aberrations of personality are more to be pitied than condemned, but whenever they appear at important strategic points in society as politicians, as governors, or as priests, they are more dangerous to the society than when they appear and play out their life in a limited field of their own private life, be it at home or even in society. With them, we have no choice but to suffer them as nobly as we do the great natural calamities such as floods or blizzards or volcanic eruptions. Thus, the author of this verse looks around and sees to his own utter amazement that cheats and self-deceivers are often wearing the very uniform of the highest occasion in the life, sannyasa. Some of the examples of these cheats are being just hinted at the stanza. One with matted locks, one with shaven head, another one has laboriously plucked his hairs one by one, at another in spectacularly colored ochre cloths. They are not conscious of the goal to reach with which they have taken the robe, nor are they striving in the right direction. Maybe every one of them takes to the sacred cloth with real intentions and sure purposes. But alas, and wrote as time passes on, they come to forget the very purpose for which they have made the sacrifice of their domestic life and their duties in the society as individual citizens. These different disguises serve them not for their philosophical seeking of truth, but only for filling their belly. If this was true at the time of Shankara, today, when more bellies are more often empty, it is the logic of life that more people should take to different types of disguises for the sake of satisfying their own hunger, thus guided by the self-preservation instinct in that lust for power and wealth. There are such false people in every walk of life even today, false leaders, false policemen, false artists and false preachers, untruthful men, faking by their external dress and behaviors to be what they are not actually by themselves. Falsehood, indeed, is as much a brilliant human capacity as honesty is one of man's heroic perfections. Deception by matted locks, ochre robes, etc., is universal and belongs to all times. The wolf in the sheep's skin is nothing new, but in other walks of life, such deceptions are not so dangerous as on the path of spirituality. We have them everywhere in all creeds, political, economic, scientific, and even spiritual. The classical example is the sensuous king of Lanka approaching the hermitage of Rama with the basket of intentions of running away with Sita, dressed as he was at that time in the robes of sannyasi. Even such a fraudulent person, when he adorns the sacred garment, must be conscious of the glory of sannyasa, at least at the moments when the large number of faithful Hindus prostrate at his sacred feet. Again, he is constantly reading about it. He has of necessity to talk about the glory of gold. Thus, intellectually, he must be knowing what is the noblest way of life, and yet it seems he fails to live up to it. Then why has he left home, cultivated his matted locks, or shaven off his head, etc.? All we can say is that such low, despicable, insignificant worms among mankind are a threat to the society, and in their incapacity to earn and live well by serving the community, they have taken to this well playing profession of deception. It is merely for the belly's sake, udara nimittam, to be unguarded mind. The whispers of the lower passions become suddenly more urgent than the call of higher aspirations. Desire for enjoyment makes man slip from his own high values of life and his disciplines in it. This stanza is traditionally attributed to Padmanabha, the famous disciple of Shankara. Verse 15, Angam Galitam Palitam Mundam Dashana Vihinam Jatam Tundam Ruddho Yati Krititva Dam Tadapi na Munchati Asha Pindam. The body has become worn out, the head has turned grey, the mouth has become toothless, the old man moves about leaning on his own staff. Even then he leaves not the bundle of his desires. That the power of desire to enjoy the sense objects is irresistible and unending is indicated in this stanza. If the individual is young, hale and hearty, brimming with energy, then the sense passions are but natural, and if not entirely inexhaustible, at least an extent it is understandable. We can very well appreciate how the world preys upon him. But this is not all. The author paints so beautifully, with very few artistic strokes of his pen, the picture of a dilapidated physical form tottering with age, in a body worn out, hair grown grey, the mouth turned toothless, the old man moves on, leaning on his own stick. Theoretically, it may be assumed that he has exhausted all passions and feels no more any hunger or thirst for flesh and pleasure, but it is very rarely so. The bundle of his desires even then leaves him not. On the other hand, it persecutes him all the more because the mind thirsts, the intellect plans, and alas, the body cannot execute. It is like the sorrows of one suffering jail life, where he remembers his own, the sweet joys in the gurgling laughter of his dashing children at home, and yet he cannot reach them because physically this has been rendered impossible. Suffering thus the greater tyrannies of inexpressible desires that ever storm him within, the old man lives an agonizing life of unimaginable sorrows. By the statement, the author indicates that the only way to peace is to control desires even while we are young, so that it becomes a habit. Thus, at least when the youthfulness has departed, the matured old man can come to live peacefully his time of retirement in tranquility and inner joy. Desires grow in the mind as the body grows old, and the dissipated body becomes more decrepit. The capacity for enjoyment leaves the body, but the mind, which has developed habits of immorality, cruelly persecutes the emaciated body. In this stanza, the picture of a young man growing old is beautifully screened. The sequence of lines in the stanza is the very sequence in which age appears in man. First, the body becomes old, then the grey hairs appear, then the teeth start falling off, and at last, the backbone has no more the strength to hold the body erect, and he takes the help of a stick to keep himself erect. Leaning on his staff, painfully he drags himself on tottering legs, a sad and pitiable sight indeed. And yet, man cannot get rid of his heavy load of desires. They seem to multiply as the body moves nearer the grave. This is Maya, this is Moha. The stanza is attributed to Sri Totakacharya. Verse 16, Agre Vahnihi Priste Banuhu Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Januhu Karatala Vikshastharu Talavasaha Tadapina Munchatyasha Pashaha. In front of the fire, at the back the sun, late at night, he sits with his knees held in his chin. He receives alms in his own scooped palm and lives under the shelter of some tree, and at the noose of desires spares him not. In the previous stanza, a householder suffering the persecutions of his own desires was painted exhaustively, and it has held up to the ridicule of all thinking persons. Is then the wandering monk in any way exempt from such subjective self persecutions? The tyrannies of desire are universal. It is a law of nature. As all scientific laws, it is also universal, and it respects no personality. The reactions of desires spare none. To bring home this idea, the picture of a true ascetic is brought out here. One may be having none of the elaborate comforts of life and having renounced everything, including even the minimum necessities of life. One may come to live with no clothing, no shelter, and with scarcely any food. Even such an individual may, to fight the inclemencies of weather, resort to warming himself up on the cloudy, wintry days near the fire. And in the clear and bright daytime, he may bask himself in the warmth of the sun. When at night the fire goes out, he may bend himself upon himself, and his chin held tight to his own knees, spend the rest of the time of the cold night. He may not keep to himself any possession, not even a begging bowl. He may accept what is given unto him in his own palm. For shelter, he may choose to be under any wayside tree. Thus, an individual may come to live even the utter necessities of life, and for all practical purposes may look a real man of renunciation. And that, says the author of the verse, we find that the cords of desire never leave him. While indicating thus a fact in life, all these pseudo sannyasis are contemptuously laughed at this verse. Mere asceticism, however impressive it may be, will not be sufficient in itself. Renouncing the objects of world is not real renunciation. To give up our desires for them is the real sacrifice, and to dry up this desire, we must distill our personality of its contents of craving. No doubt, self-denial at the level of senses is the means, but the goal is the total elimination of even the very thirst to enjoy. Shankara in Atma Bodha very vividly describes that the spiritual student should give up all his clinging attachments to joy arising from the outer objects. Here we end part 7. We will continue the remaining in part 8 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shri Krishna Namaha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Sri Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 8. Self-denial, even when it is real, cannot produce the true results unless it is accompanied by a high mental purity. The stories in the Puranas of Rakshasas doing tapas are examples to illustrate this point. Out of all their tapas, the Rakshasas ultimately got only their self-destruction brought upon themselves by their own indulgence. The Gitacharya calls such people who so ostensibly practice asceticism but are in fact mentally spending themselves in sensuous self-dissipation as hypocrites. Physical self-denial, it is now clear, alone in itself will not do. There must be elimination of desires from the mind, without which all asceticism is a mental self-persecution. Through asceticism, the vitalities that would otherwise have been spent in indulgence can be conserved, but without redirecting it for creative self-application, self-denial becomes a ruinous self-suppression. Reapplying the energy so discovered in ourselves as a result of our self-denial on the path of positive development and spiritual unfoldment is called sublimation of our instincts. Suppression is the unprofitable. There is no profit greater than sublimation. This stanza is attributed to Sri Hastamalaka. Verse 17. Kurute Ganga Sagara Gamanam Rata Paripalana Matava Dhyanam Jnana Vihinaha Sarvamatena Muktim Nabhajati Janma Shatena. One may in pilgrimage go to where Ganges meet the ocean called the Ganga Sagara, or observes oaths, or distribute gifts in charity, if he is devoid of first-hand experience of truth, jnanam, according to all the schools of thought, he gains no release, even in 100 lives. When Hastamalaka has thus mentioned and criticized the futility of unintelligent tapas by recluses, Sri Subodha contributes in this stanza an extension of the very same idea contained in the previous stanza. What about tapas in the life of devoted householders, seekers of the true end of the religion, to do go for pilgrimages, observe oaths, and offer charities? All of them are wonderful exercises for developing healthy attitudes to life and in helping one on to the path of study and contemplation. But ordinarily, householders confuse these means as an end in themselves. This erroneous concept is being laughed at by the poet. Without knowledge of the infinite reality, liberation from our sense of finitude is impossible. In the Upanishads also we often find this idea that freedom from the thraldom of life can never be gained unless one comes to experience the infinite oneness of life. Here, walking the path of the ancient teachers, Sri Subodha says that it is the unanimous conclusion arrived at by all schools of thought in the Vedanta that liberation from the sorrows of life cannot be gained without the actual first-handed experience of the one infinitude. The Acharya is sure, and he asserts with emphasis, that by mere practice of these noble exercises one cannot reach one's destination even in 100 lives. In the text, the phrase Gangasagara can mean the place where the Ganges meet the Bay of Bengal, called in India as Gangasagara. It can also mean Ganga and Sagara, meaning the pilgrimages to Kashi where Ganga flows, and to Rameshwara where a bath in the Sagara. Setu is the most important item. Pilgrimages to Kashi and Rameshwara will bring a lot of vivid experiences for a person who is doing it with faith, dedication, devotion and sincerity, especially when it is undertaken on foot as they used to do in the past. Educating the intellect to hold higher ideals, training the mind to obey the will, sharpening one's will itself and training it to be easily wielded by oneself are the achievements gained by the practice of oaths. Through firm determination and individual will, when one orders what one's sense organs will not have for a fixed period of time, some of the things which they always liked the most, there we have all the contents of the oath. And then when it is undertaken in a spirit of dedication unto the Lord, and the entire mind is turned towards the Lord, it becomes a very efficient psychological training in recasting the mind, and it becomes a religious oath. However beautifully and elaborately one may cook one's food until that food becomes one with oneself, The sorrows of hunger cannot end. Pilgrimages, oaths, and charity are all exercises to prepare the seeker's mind for the great path of meditation. Through meditation, until the highest is actually apprehended, total freedom from the natural human weaknesses can never be gained, not even the 100 lives. The old teachers in Vedanta used to tell us, the snake on the rope seen by your foolishness cannot disappear by Garuda mantra, nor can, they used to add, the ghosts you have projected on the post run away by ringing the bell. Waking up alone is the remedy for all the sorrows of the dream. Wake up, O limited ego, and come to apprehend your own infinite nature, wherein there is neither matter nor spirit, that thou art. This stanza is believed to have been written by Sri Subodha. Verse 18. Suramandira taro moola nivasaha shayya bhutala mujinam vasaha sarva parigraha bhogatyagaha kasya sukha na karoti viragaha. Sheltering in temples under some trees, sleeping on the naked ground, wearing a deer skin, and thus renouncing all idea of possession and thirst to enjoy, to whom will not dispassion, vairagya. Earlier, a hypocrite was painted by Sri Hastamalaka, and now in this stanza, a real renouncers who has truly relinquished all his inner thirst for enjoying the world outside is being pictured by Sri Sureshwaracharya. True dispassion brings real happiness to all. In the world outside, we find even emperors sorrowing, the rich worrying, the powerful man anxious, the man of accomplishment jealous, all are unhappy. Everyone points out to the other man who according to him is happier, but the only one who has the courage to declare and truly feel that is happy is he who has relinquished all his passions and hungers from within. One cried out, I am Caesar's Caesar. Another thundered forth, I am Shah and Shah. He alone is really rich, who has no more any use for the finite joys of this ephemeral world of delusory pleasures. Such an individual may have no shelter of his own more than the shade of a tree in the courtyard of a temple. He may sleep there under it on the naked ground. He may wear nothing but a deer skin, renouncing thus the entire idea of possession and relinquishing all attempts to seek one's fulfillment in life through objects of the world. He lives happily, ever self-sufficient unto himself. He is independent of the world outside. He has discovered an inexhaustible well of joy and a rich mine of true satisfaction in his own deep within. Who will not be happy in this mental mood? Asks Sureshwaracharya in this work. When renunciation is only external and when there is still a sense of attachment within, one cannot discover the true joy of living. This has been already said. It may then be suspected that there is no joy whatsoever to reward renunciation and tapas. This is not true. To assess so would be positively against all our scriptural declarations. Here is painted the outer behavior and the inner attitudes to life in a true relinquisher. He has reached the stage of desirelessness, not as a result of his deliberate running away from life, but due to a positive experience of intense self-sufficiency felt and lived within. It has been beautifully described in the picture of the man of steady wisdom in Gita. The inner riches must be the basis of our outer poverty, or else renunciation is indeed painful. The healthy outlook on life must be nurtured by an enduring inlook which the student must cultivate. Without insight into the reality, the outer man can never dare to give up the enchanting things of the outer world of beauty. Simple and unostentatious becomes the way of life of a true master. The emperor of emperors in him lives on the luxurious roughness under some nameless tree, shading the courtyard of any wayside temple. Generally, in a temple ground, late in the night, nobody wanders about, and so under a tree, there he is all alone, enjoying perfect solitude, and the sleep is comfortable not because of softness of the bed but because of the purity of man's heart. A true man of seeking being innocent has no mental worry, and so, in his positive life of peaceful love for all, he sleeps comfortably on the rough ground, luxuriously cushioned by his own sense of purity and his heart's essential goodness. Who will not be happy then? All others are unhappy indeed. They may have a lot of possessions, but their mind has the cancer of desire, and their intellect has the carbuncle of conceit. The same idea is being described in the Upanishads also. By renunciation alone can immortality be achieved. Again, in the other Upanishad, the teacher of discussing the glory of renunciation comes to the conclusion that renunciation alone is the seat of fearlessness. Verse 19 Yogaratova Bogaratova Sangaratova Sangavihinaha Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chittam Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva. Let one revel in yoga or let one revel in boga. Let one seek enjoyment in company or revel in solitude away from the crowd. He whose mind revels in Brahman, he enjoys. Verily, he alone enjoys. This is a verse glorifying the state of realization of Brahman as conceived by the scriptures of the Hindus to one who has awakened to his great truth. It is immaterial thereafter whether he is in a crowd or living all alone, in boga or in yoga. In whatever condition he may live, he is the real joy. Mind at rest is the temple of joy. So long as it is gurgling with its desires, passions, and attachments in its stormy surface, the signature of joy gets ruffled out. To him who has realized the highest in himself and has thereby recognized the non-existing of the multiple world of names and forms, and who has also realized the infinite bliss in the sense of oneness, his indeed is the true joy. This joy is true because it is not dependent upon things and beings, nor upon the arrangement of things around the individual. To a man of realization, after his experience of infinite, there is nothing more real to him than the Brahman, and therefore let him remain practicing self-control if he so chooses, or let him live in the seeming indulgence at the sense levels. Let him be in the company of the world, serving the world by joining himself at the head of the parade, or let him remain burying himself in lonely contemplation in the silence of some Himalayan cave. His alone is the true joy of the within. He no more seeks from the outer world any joy from his sense gratification. There are very many texts where it is said that even the Vedas dare not prescribe rules to regulate a perfect man's behavior. He has all freedom. He can do anything. In explaining this absolute freedom allowed to the man of perfection, Panchadashi goes so as to say, killing parents, destroying embryos, these sins even cannot destroy either the liberation achieved by the saint or the joyous glow on his face. This is not to be understood as licentiousness which the Brahmin has allowed himself through the Vedas. It is something like the special powers we allow some great men in all walks of life, even in our modern world. The Supreme Court judge can finally decide whether a murderer is to be hanged or not, or the President of India is given the power of pardon the condemned and reduce his punishment to life imprisonment. Here we will stop part 8. We will continue the remaining in part 9 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.